All right, Doc Washburn in the house, News Talk 1110 WBT. And we'd like to invite our next guest to the program. This is a local businessman here in Charlotte, Mike Steinberg, who is running for the Republican nomination in the 9th Congressional District against the incumbent Robert Pittenger. Mr. Steinberg, thanks for coming on the program, sir. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Let me actually play devil's advocate here. Republicans, of course, have the majority in the U.S. House, not the Senate. They're trying to get the majority in the Senate this year. But they have the majority in the U.S. House and really hope to take the Senate this year, and then, of course, hope to take the White House in the November election 2016, and then change some things, turn some things around in this country. So why, at this point, is it a good idea for a successful businessman like yourself to go to bat and to challenge an incumbent Republican member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, I think if you look back at history, in 2000 to 2002, we actually had the White House and both houses of Congress, majority in both houses of Congress, and yet spending went up dramatically. And I feel like it's not a matter of having the votes. You have to have the will to make the cuts and to do the things that need to be done.
Okay, and I guess by extension, you would say that your opponent, the incumbent Congressman Pittenger, is not strong enough on cutting spending. I mean, this is your opportunity basically to make the case to the listeners who may not even realize that he has a primary opponent.
Right. Back in October of 2013, he was actually one of the deciding votes to fund Obamacare and also increase the debt another $1 trillion, plus whatever Obamacare is going to wind up costing our government. So, he is not a fiscal conservative by any stretch.
That was I think that was the vote that a lot of Republicans who had kind of voted for fiscal sanity up until then figured like, well, we need to get a budget, so we're just going to have to compromise. And a lot of, I think a lot of conservatives, folks who, aren't that politically active or astute are going, wait a minute. Why are we doing this? Why are we raising the debt ceiling? Why are we giving the president so much of what he wants? If I understand correctly, that was the same vote that actually cut benefits for veterans.
Right, and John Boehner has been horrible at messaging, and he lets President Obama dictate the playing field. And when President Obama went on, he went public to try and get the Republicans to cave, and he said, well, if the government shut down, we're not going to be able to pay senior citizens, and we're not going to be able to pay veterans. And, a strong Speaker of the House would have grabbed the media's attention and said, look, Mr. President, why don't you cut off foreign aid to countries like Russia or China or Egypt? There's 1,000 ways to cut spending. You don't need to threaten our senior citizens. But the Republicans, were feeling the heat. And if they would have stood their ground, they actually could have won that battle. But there were certain Republicans, such as our representative, Mr. Pittenger, who caved and gave in to the president. And they voted along with Nancy Pelosi and said, okay, we'll give the president what he wants.
Let me ask you about, you make an interesting, you use an interesting phrase there, feeling the heat. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times Republicans are feeling the heat from the mainstream media, from perhaps Washington lobbyists, but I don't think that a lot of the voters were on board with this. When we see a guy like Ted Cruz make the case against Obamacare and be willing to filibuster to try to stop it and warn what's coming down the pike, and then a lot of his Republicans, members of the Senate, basically wouldn't stand with him, and sure enough, everything he warned came down. I don't know. I just wonder, about Boehner accepting Obama's premises so often. I wonder if we had a Speaker of the House who said, I'll tell you what we do. I'll tell you how we can balance the budget. I'll tell you how we can bring the economy back. Any department, bureau, agency, or commission in the federal government which cannot be specifically justified by the United States Constitution, that's what we should get rid of. And I just don't see that, with a lot of our Congress people. I'm wondering if you think that that's a legit way to go.
Absolutely, and that's the problem, is that the Democrats aren't the party of the little guy, the everyday guy.
Right.
The Republicans aren't the party anymore of small government for the most part.
Yeah.
The establishment Republicans have basically capitulated to being the party of big government, and even this weekend, Representative Pittenger told the 9th District, it was a 9th District meeting, and he said he wanted to replace Obamacare with a better program. So what is that now, Republican care? The federal government has no business being in the healthcare industry. And I think that's what people, especially the Republican base, needs to understand, is that we're operating so far outside of the Constitution that there are no rules anymore. That I think it was Tom Coburn who said that the Constitution was the fireplace that contained the power.
Yeah.
And once you breach the fireplace, the fire is out of control. So in other words, once you start operating outside the bounds of the Constitution, there are no rules anymore. And that's why we see we're borrowing at the rate of $40,000 per second.
Wow.
That's the borrowing. The debt borrowing that we're doing right now is $40,000 per second. And it's been going on since the Bush administration. And that's absolutely insane. And until we get fiscal sanity back into Washington, nothing's going to be fixed.
It is insane. I'm wondering, there's another local issue that I had asked Congressman Pittenger about one time, and I don't really feel like I got a straight answer from him. This whole idea of the state of North Carolina, in combination with the federal government, going into a 50-year lease with some kind of multinational corporation to build toll lanes on I-77 between Brookshire Freeway and Mooresville, which I think would make life a lot more difficult for, working people who don't make a whole lot of money. And I asked Congressman Pittenger about it when it happened on the air last time, and I didn't really understand where he was coming down on it. I felt like I got a filibuster. Maybe I should have asked earlier in the interview, but I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to that, since it is kind of a controversial local issue.
Right, and I think if representatives were wise, they would listen to their constituents, and especially the ones that are affected by it. Unfortunately, what happens is, and I think it was in all the president's men follow the money trail. And
Woodward and Bernstein, yeah.
A lot of politicians have a really sound opinion on it, and they say, the right thing, and then, they meet with some lobbyists, or they meet with some of the construction companies that would be involved, and their opinions change. So I think that it's best to listen to the constituents in that area, and it seems like the vast majority of them are tremendously opposed to any type of toll roads. And I think to introduce toll roads here in North Carolina would be a mistake.
Yeah. Now, there's been another. I want to ask you another quick question here before we let you run. There has been another issue that a lot of people are very concerned about, and there is a great concern that the Republican leadership in the U.S. House is going to try to push this through after the primaries are over. And that is immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, or as those of us, sitting on the sofa watching the news call it amnesty. And the concern here is that just like when Reagan got fooled by the Democrats in 1986, that they'll promise, border security, but instead they're just going to legalize millions of people and they'll never build the fence. What do you think about that?
Completely against all forms of amnesty. I think we need to enforce the laws. I think it's an abomination that the federal government has been turning their backs on states that have been asking for help to enforce the federal law that's in effect. It's almost incomprehensible to me that a state can request to the federal government and say, hey, we need help enforcing the federal law,
Yeah.
and the federal government says no. That needs to change immediately. And I think that the Republicans that are wishy-washy on this area, and Mr. Pittenger is on record with saying some things where he hasn't quite come out and endorsed amnesty, so I'm not going to misrepresent his record.
Okay.
He has made some public statements that show that he's, I'll just say that I'm 100% in favor of enforcing the laws that are on the books right now.
Right.
We need to do it, and we need to protect. Look, one of the few things that the federal government is constitutionally authorized to do is to protect us from foreign invasion. And
Right.
when you have 10 to anywhere, I've heard numbers as high as 30 million illegal aliens in this country, we've been invaded. Not every invasion is going to come with, swords and guns. We've been invaded, and we need the federal government to respond.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. Well, again, the congressional district number 9 goes from the South Carolina state line down below Waxhaw, goes up and grabs Indian Trail, Matthews, Mint Hill, swings around the south part of Mecklenburg County, and then back up the west part of Mecklenburg County and grabs a whole lot of Iredell County up above Statesville, up above I-40. And our guest is Mike Steinberg, and he is running for the Republican nomination against the incumbent Robert Pittenger. And if people want to know more, Mr. Steinberg, what is your website where they can check you out?
It's Mike for Us. It's Mike, F-O-R-U-S, MikeForUS.com.
MikeForUs.com, MikeForUS.com. Well, we appreciate you coming on the program this evening, and we always like to get some... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Always like to get some different voices out there, and have a great evening, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Coming back after the break.